Welcome to The Explainer. You know, every single day, millions of us step onto these massive metal tubes and just get lifted tens of thousands of feet into the air. But have you ever stopped to think, how? How does that even work?
I mean, it really does feel impossible, doesn't it? We're talking about a machine that can weigh more than a blue whale, just hanging out up there in the sky. But humanity did crack the code. And the secret, well, it's not some single magic trick. It's this incredible story of physics, brilliant engineering, and a few really stubborn pioneers who just wouldn't take no for an answer.
You know, the dream of flying, it's as old as we are. You see it in ancient myths like Icarus. You see it with the first hot air balloons. But for literally thousands of years, all of that dreaming and all of that thinking was stuck on one deeply flawed idea.
I mean, for centuries, the logic seemed pretty straightforward, right? Birds fly, they flap their wings. So if we want to fly, we should probably flap our wings too. And this idea led to all these wild contraptions like the ornithopter, which even the great Leonardo da Vinci sketched out. The whole game was just trying to copy what we saw birds doing.
Yeah, but as it turns out, all that flapping was a total dead end. The real secret wasn't in mimicking the bird. The massive breakthrough came when a few key thinkers stopped asking, "What do birds do?" and started asking a much better question. What does the air do? And that simple shift, that focus on physics, well, that changed everything.
Okay, so let's really get into it. Cracking this code wasn't some single eureka moment. Not at all. It was this slow, painstaking process. A chain of discovery built by a series of brilliant and, frankly, pretty daring people who each passed the baton to the next.
So, first up, you've got this guy, Sir George Cayley. Way back in the early 1800s, he basically wrote the recipe for flight. He was the first person to realize, hey, you can't solve this all at once. You got to break it down. You need to figure out lift, then you need to figure out thrust, and you need to figure out control. He literally laid out the blueprint for everyone who came after him.
Then you get guys like Otto Lilienthal. They called him the Glider King. And he wasn't just sketching things on paper. Oh no. This guy was the test pilot. He built these gliders and literally jumped off hills, get this, more than 2,500 times. Can you imagine? Every single one of those flights was a life-or-death experiment, gathering the data that was absolutely essential for what came next.
And all that work, all that thinking from Cayley, all that risk from Lilienthal, it all leads to this. 12 seconds. That's it. Just 12 seconds. On a windy beach in North Carolina, the Wright brothers' little machine stays in the air for 12 seconds and covers about 120 feet. I mean, it's just a hop, really. But it was the first time in all of human history that a person had taken off in a powered machine, actually controlled it, and landed safely. In those 12 seconds, the impossible just became history.
And here's the really crucial part to understand. The Wright brothers weren't just a couple of lucky guys messing around in a shed. No way. They were methodical engineers. They solved the problem piece by piece. First, they perfected control using kites and gliders. Then, they built the world's first ever wind tunnel to test hundreds of different wing shapes. And only then, only after they knew for sure their design could fly, did they even think about adding an engine.
All right, so we've seen how the problem got solved. Now let's take a look at the solution itself. Let's break down the anatomy of the flying machine.
Okay, so here's a quick tour. First, you've got the fuselage. That's just the main body. It holds all the people, the cargo, and connects all the other bits together. Then you have the wings, and as we're about to see, they are the real heroes of this story. Way at the back, you've got the tail assembly. The fancy word is empennage, and its job is to keep the whole thing stable. And of course, the landing gear, pretty important for getting back on the ground in one piece.
Now, this is really fascinating. It shows you how engineers think about safety. They basically classify every single part on the plane based on a simple question. What happens if this breaks? And for primary structures, like the wings or the main body, the answer is catastrophic. It means loss of the aircraft. So these parts are designed with a simple philosophy. They cannot fail. That thinking is at the absolute core of how we build airplanes.
So, we've seen the hardware, right? The actual metal parts of the plane. But the real secret to flight, it's not in the metal. It's in this invisible battle of forces that's constantly happening all around it. I want you to picture any plane you see in the sky.
as being in the middle of this constant four-way tug of war. Okay? So in the vertical direction, you've got lift, this force from the wings pulling it up, fighting against the plane's own weight, which is just gravity pulling it down. Then, horizontally, you have the engines creating thrust, pushing it forward, fighting against drag, which is just air resistance trying to hold it back. And for that plane to just fly straight and level, that tug-of-war has to be a perfect, balanced stalemate.
Now, out of all four of those forces, the most mysterious, the one that people get wrong all the time, is lift. This is the magic force, the one that has to overcome all that incredible weight. So, how do the wings actually do it? Well, the truth is, it's not just one simple thing. It's actually a combination of two key physics principles working together. And this is such a great example of how physics works in the real world. So, part one of the answer is something called Bernoulli's principle. Because of the wing's curved shape, the air has to travel faster over the top of it. And a weird rule of physics is that faster moving air has lower pressure. So you get low pressure on top, higher pressure on the bottom, and whoosh, the wing gets pushed up. But that's not the whole story. At the exact same time, you've got Newton's third law. The wing is tilted, so it's physically pushing air down. And as Newton said, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So as the wing shoves air down, the air shoves the wing up. It's both of these things happening at once that creates lift.
The other two forces, the horizontal ones, are a bit more straightforward. You've got thrust, which is just the raw power from the engines, blasting air backward to push the plane forward. And then you have its eternal enemy, drag. That's just air resistance, pushing back on every single surface. To move forward, thrust has to be stronger than drag. Simple as that.
All right, so if a plane flying straight is all about keeping those four forces in perfect balance, then how on earth does a pilot actually steer the thing? Let's dive into our final section and see how they deliberately mess with that balance to control the aircraft.
So think about it. If lift equals weight and thrust equals drag, the plane just wants to go straight. To do anything else, to climb, to turn, to descend, a pilot has to unbalance those forces. And they do it in a really precise way, using these small movable flaps on the wings and the tail.
Basically, a pilot is juggling three types of movement at all times. First, there's pitch. That's pointing the nose up or down. They use little flaps on the tail called elevators to do that. Then there's roll, which is banking the plane from side to side. That's done with flaps on the outer edges of the wings called ailerons. And finally, there's yaw. That's just nudging the nose left or right, and for that, they use the rudder on the tail fin. By blending those three moves together, a pilot can put that 400-ton machine exactly where it needs to be.
So here are the big takeaways. First, flight was solved by understanding physics, not just by trying to copy birds. Second, an airplane is always in this delicate balance between four forces: lift, weight, thrust, and drag. Third, that mysterious lift comes from a combination of air pressure and pushing air down. And finally, pilots steer by using small control surfaces to manage the plane's pitch, roll, and yaw. It's not magic, it's a masterpiece of engineering.
And that brings us to a final thought for you. We figured out the impossible problem of getting into the air. But as we look to the future, with things like full automation, electric jets, and totally new materials, you have to wonder, what's the next impossible problem that a new generation of engineers is going to have to solve?